I am a 70-year-old woman, but my body still burns with desires I cannot ignore. And he is Ethan, my 18-year-old grandson. He is young, full of life, and just beginning to understand the complexities of the world. And I, with my experience, am the temptation he never anticipated. What happens when forbidden emotions turn into a dangerous obsession? What challenges the very foundation of family bonds? The line between what is right and wrong blurs. Discover the shocking truths at the end of this story. My name is Vivian, and at 70, I thought I had seen it all. I became a widow a decade ago when Henry, my husband of 40 years, passed away from a heart attack. Since then, I devoted myself entirely to my family. 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and among them, one stood out as the most special to me. His name is Marcos, the boy who unknowingly became the center of my greatest conflict. Marcos was a young man who had just turned 18. He was the son of Clara, my youngest daughter, who tragically succumbed to terminal cancer. On her deathbed, she made me promise to care for her only child. "You're the only one I trust, Mother," were her final words. Marcos' father had passed away years earlier in an accident, leaving the boy completely alone. Without hesitation, I took him in and welcomed him into my home. I watched him grow in our house, becoming an exceptionally bright and kind teenager, tall for his age, with striking green eyes inherited from his mother and a smile that lit up every room. Marcos was the pride of everyone in the family, but especially mine. He was my favorite grandchild, though I never admitted it aloud. Everything shifted when he turned 18. Having graduated high school with honors and preparing for university, he underwent a transformation from boy to man right before my eyes. One day, something awakened within me that should have never been stirred. It happened on a particularly hot summer night. I found him in the kitchen, drinking water after his workout. For the first time, I didn't see him as the child I had raised, but as the man he was becoming. I froze in the doorway, aware that something unsettling was taking root inside me. "Grandma Elena," he said with a smile, using that affectionate term that now filled me with guilt. "Can't sleep?" His voice had changed. It was deeper, more mature. I stepped into the kitchen, attempting to act normal, but my hands shook as I poured a glass of water. "The heat is keeping me awake," I replied, avoiding direct eye contact. He moved closer to help with the glass, and our fingers brushed. An electric jolt shot through me. I pulled away abruptly, spilling some water. "Are you okay?" he asked, stepping closer. His genuine concern only heightened my inner turmoil. The following days became a torment. Every shared moment, every innocent smile turned into a source of anguish. I loathed myself for the thoughts invading my mind. He was my grandson, someone I had raised, yet something forbidden was growing within me. Marcos noticed my change in behavior. I tried to avoid him, finding excuses to stay in my room. But living under the same roof made it impossible to maintain distance. One night, while everyone else slept, he found me crying in the garden. "What's wrong, Grandma Elena?" he asked, sitting beside me on the bench under the orange tree his mother had planted. "You've seemed different lately. Did I do something wrong?" His closeness overwhelmed me. The scent of his cologne mixed with his natural smell made me dizzy. "You've done nothing wrong," I said. "The problem is with me." "Why would you say that?" he asked, his hand gently touching mine in the darkness. This time I didn't pull away. "Because I'm feeling things I shouldn't," I confessed, the words escaping before I could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. His hand remained on mine, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I feel the same." Those 4 words changed everything. We sat quietly, staring at each other under the dim light of the garden. It was as if time had stopped, the air charged with an unspoken energy. Before I could react, he leaned toward me. His proximity left me frozen, unable to think clearly. What followed shattered every boundary that had existed. It was a gentle, hesitant touch, yet filled with an intensity that left me breathless. I should have stopped him then. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Something within me, something long dormant, had awakened. I responded instinctively. as if a spark had reignited a fire extinguished for years. The world around us faded away. It was just us, caught in a moment that defied logic and crossed boundaries I once thought unbreakable. Our connection transformed into something dangerous and all-consuming. I particularly remember one day. While cleaning the house that morning, I chose a light skirt, perfect for the oppressive afternoon heat. It wasn't special, just practical. I focused on my chores, not considering how my attire might appear. At one point, while wiping a corner of the kitchen, I bent down to reach an awkward spot. I lingered for a moment, engrossed in my task, unaware of my surroundings. The house was quiet, and I hadn't realized that Marcos usually returned from his training at that hour. The soft sound of his steps broke the silence. I looked up to find him standing in the doorway, his expression unsettling. His gaze wasn't the same as usual. There was something different, something I couldn't place, but that made me uneasy. Marcos, once carefree, now seemed like someone entirely new. His posture was more confident, his presence more commanding. A seriousness in his eyes caught me off guard. In that moment, I felt vulnerable, as though an invisible shift in our dynamic had occurred without my noticing. I quickly stood and resumed my task, but his gaze lingered. It was as if an unseen barrier between us had dissolved, leaving me unsure of how to act. Was it my imagination, or had something truly changed? "Can I help you with anything?" I asked, trying to sound calm as I stood upright. I attempted to mask the unease bubbling within me, but as I looked at him, I noticed he wasn't looking away. His expression carried something deeper than mere curiosity, and for a moment, my heart raced inexplicably. I didn't understand what I was feeling, but it was undeniable. Marcos approached slowly, silent, the air between us charged with tension. He stopped just inches away, close enough that I could feel his warmth. "You've been working too hard, Grandma. You should rest," he said, his tone unfamiliar, closer. Confusion and vulnerability swept over me. On instinct, I stepped back slightly, but his gaze remained fixed on me. I could feel the weight of his presence pressing into every corner of the room. Then, without warning, he leaned in toward me, slowly, deliberately, as if waiting for permission. I froze, caught in a storm of conflicting emotions. My mind screamed to stop him, to remember what was right, but my body didn't respond. His closeness was overwhelming. In that instant, the world fell away. My heart thundered, breaking the silence, and everything within me overflowed. The tension that had built between us found release, and I let myself be carried away, unable to resist. My breathing quickened, reason slipping further with each moment. His proximity was magnetic, irresistible. He whispered something in my ear, words I couldn't fully register, but they didn't matter. Words were unnecessary. What had been hidden for so long between us was now undeniable. At that moment, there was no past or future, only the present and no turning back. Time seemed suspended, and everything else faded into oblivion. It was as if we were caught in a wordless dance, a shared language that needed no explanation. When we finally parted, silence filled the room, heavy but tinged with understanding. I knew what had happened, but I wasn't ready to confront it. Confusion enveloped me. Did I want answers or to forget everything? Marcos stepped back slowly, avoiding my gaze, but I knew neither of us could stop thinking about what had occurred. And I couldn't forget it either. From that day, my life changed irreversibly. The stolen glances during meals, the fleeting touches, the late-night encounters, each moment became a blend of torment and desire. My eldest daughter, Diana, noticed something was off. "Mom, don't you think Marcos is unusually close to you lately?" she asked one day. Paranoia began to set in, consuming us. Every sound in the night, every suspicious glance, every casual comment felt like a potential threat. Marcos was no longer just the boy I had raised. He was now a man entangled in this inescapable web. Family gatherings grew increasingly strained. The tension between us was palpable, and I often sensed the wary eyes of my children. Though they couldn't pinpoint it, they knew something was wrong. The breaking point came at Christmas dinner. The entire family gathered, as always, But this year, an unspoken tension hung over us. The aroma of turkey and festive dishes couldn't mask the unease. Everyone tried to maintain appearances, but cracks began to show. Marcos helped me in the kitchen, as he often did, while the others chatted in the dining room. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, but to me it felt like a cruel facade. Christmas, a time of unity, had become a reminder of what we'd done and what we'd lost. As I stood by the counter, Marcos approached, his movements filled with urgency. It wasn't casual, it was deliberate, driven by an unstoppable need. Suddenly, the crash of a plate shattering on the floor broke the moment. Standing in the doorway was Isabel, my 15-year-old granddaughter, her wide eyes filled with shock. A muffled gasp escaped her lips, and chaos erupted. My children stormed in, disbelief and pain etched on their faces. My son Philip looked at me, his expression a mixture of anger and profound sadness. The weight of their disappointment was crushing. Marcos tried to defend me, to shield me, but it was futile. There was no saving what had been exposed. That night ended with Marcos being sent to live with distant relatives. I wasn't allowed to say goodbye. Attempts to explain or seek forgiveness were met with silence. No one wanted to hear me. I was the guilty party. The months that followed were hellish. Loneliness became my constant companion. My children barely spoke to me. My grandchildren avoided me. Neighbors stared with disdain. Watching other families enjoy time together only deepened my despair. I wondered if I'd ever again be the woman I once was: a mother, a grandmother, a friend. I became a shadow in my own home, evading the judgmental eyes of those who once cared for me. My children's trust was shattered, and I had no idea how to mend what I'd broken. Marcos reached out several times: letters, emails, phone calls. Each word was a dagger, reminding me of what we'd lost. I never responded. I felt I had no right. His last letter was the hardest. He asked for forgiveness, acknowledging that what we had could never be. For everyone's sake, he wrote, we have to let go. His understanding broke me, for it left no room for redemption. I heard he was doing well, finishing his studies, meeting someone his own age, building a new life. Yet, I couldn't help but wonder if a part of him still thought of me as I thought of him. Had he moved on? Or did the shadows of our actions still haunt him? They say love knows no boundaries, no limits. But I know love can blind us, push us to cross lines we should never approach. Some loves are born of loneliness, of need, of suppressed desires, but others destroy us. Mine destroyed me, leaving scars that will never heal. In my heart, I hope one day to rebuild trust with my children, to watch my grandchildren play without feeling like a stranger. But deep down, I know some wounds remain forever. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, I wonder if Marcos will forget, if my children will ever look at me the same way. Above all, I wonder if I will ever forgive myself, or find the strength to face my own demons. What we did was a sin, one that cannot be erased, justified, or forgotten. And yet, despite the guilt consuming me, I cannot stop loving him. Perhaps that is my greatest sin of all. Did today's twists and secrets captivate you? Imagine what's to come. Give us a like if you're left wanting more, and subscribe so you don't miss our next stories. Continue exploring our channel for more drama and passion waiting to be uncovered.